Congratulations on your ASC Award nomination this year.
Thank you. I am completely honored by all of it. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'd love to start at the beginning. What brought you onto the project? What attracted you to the subject material?
I didn't know about the book before I went into this interview, although it's such a popular book. And after I actually finished the show, I read the book just because I didn't want to get complicated with things. But I was brought on like a lot of other of my jobs. There was one of the main producers of the show. I had worked with her on a couple of other projects, and she recommended me. And I guess the interview went well because we're sitting here right now. But yeah, and then as I learned more, when I was in the interview, there was one or two scripts that were written at the time, so I read them, presented images, and here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, that's really interesting hearing that you read the book after. What was that like once you did? Were you like, ah, I really feel like I went in a different direction, or like, oh, this was exactly how I was seeing it, or how was that?
I honestly, I didn't. It's not that I didn't want to read the book for any other reason other than I didn't want to get confused if the
Right.
writers decided to go in a different direction. And I was like, wait, that happened there. Um, when I read the book after, obviously I had Brie Larson in my head, and
Yeah.
I knew all the things, but it's such an enjoyable book that it kind of like took me to a place separate from the shooting of all things. Uh, and we did do, we delved from the story a little bit especially in the episode that I submitted for the
Mhm.
ASC. It doesn't really go back in time with Calvin's story in the book, but um, yeah, I think they had their own experiences. Let's just say that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd love to talk about that episode Book of
Sure.
Calvin and what sets it apart and what, were some particular challenges or things that you accomplished with it that really you were pleased about.
Yeah, I mean, what I loved most is that it was so different than the other episodes. We go back and basically tell the point of view from a completely different character. And so you learn about a different story, and sort of at one point in the story, you meet up with our main character, and then you see how the love story formed in a different way. I loved that, the director and I, Tara Millet, we created a different look for the 1930s. And I also just truly loved, the two men that converse, Calvin Evans and Wakely, how they're conversing in the 1950s through letters, how they don't know each other, how they like strengthen each other's worlds through knowledge and intellect. And, on in regards to challenges, that specifically the director and I were given scenes where it was a lot of just voiceover. It was not descriptive scenes of they do this, they do this. So Tara and I really created this cohesion of images that I feel were nice complements and metaphors to what they were saying. And sometimes it wasn't, if Wakely wasn't talking, it wasn't specifically him. It was like he's talking about God, and then we are on the open water with Calvin, and it feels very godly. So there was like really a sort of a breakdown of like how do we want this to be put together, not just a mishmash of things. I think in episode 7, I talked about how the two men converse, and specifically the one of the biggest challenges of that block was the day of rowing,
Mm.
because we were shooting it in December. We were shooting it out in San Dimas at this man-made lake. And we had to do, because of the way, scheduling and whatnot, we had to do all the work in 7. There's some rowing work in episode 8. There was some rowing work from 5 that they didn't do because they paired it with us. So we had a lot to do in one day, and we had to all do it. The sun sets at 4:30 maybe. So for any cinematographer, I'm sure listening, is like seeing that sunset and knowing that you didn't get all the work done was probably the biggest thing on my mind that day. And also being on the water, complicates things a little bit, because although you have boats and you can guide them, it's like putting his boat in the right place for the sun to be in the right direction. Um, we had a plan. We had a great operator on the helm, my A operator, Mika Levin. Uh, and we achieved, and the crew itself, we achieved everything, but it took a lot of homework, a lot of planning. Um, and, I couldn't be happier with that imagery. It's some of my favorite in the show. I remember when I interviewed, there was a scene in the first episode. They changed it a little bit, but it was describing Calvin on the open water, early morning, California, and I immediately thought of that imagery. I was like, God, I see that. I want to shoot that. And when the scripts came out, I didn't know if we were coming back to Calvin in that way.
Mhm.
Zach did 1 and 2, and then when I read 7 and I saw that we were going to be on the open water and we were actually there filming, it was just like, it was exactly what I wanted it to be. It was, yeah.
How did you go about, in conjunction with the director, figuring out what the 1930s were gonna look and feel like to you?
So we talked about how, Calvin is established where we know him in the 50s, but in the 30s his story is this young boy living in a boys' home. He's stripped of a family, he's stripped of a home, um, and then he has this, but he continues to have this perseverance and becomes this accomplished scientist, right? So we felt if there was a time to strip away the color
Mm,
and sort of create a cooler palette, blooming highlights. This was where we could do it in the story. And it was written in the script that once you transition from the 30s to the 50s, there's that flash photography bulb, and then it brings you into the 50s, and you really see the difference in color from where we are as the young boy and where he gets to. And so it felt like that was a great place to go in terms of color.
mhm,
Used a lot of reference images and then sort of created a lot, and worked with our, as any cinematographer knows, it's like you could create a look, but the collaboration of the other principal, behind the scenes members, our costume department, our set design, was all constructed with less color as well, just to kind of
mhm.
enhance that look.
I don't know if you did collaborate much, with the other DP on the series, Zach Geller, or not, but if you did, what was that like?
Yeah, Zach. So first off, I've done quite a few shows, but this was my first one doing a show with another
Mm,
cinematographer. Um, and Zach was probably the best person to do this first experience with. He was such a true collaborator from the beginning. And I think what we spoke about at the beginning is, although there is, he started the show on 1 and 2, the beauty of this series is that it chronicles the life of this woman, and each chapter, because of what happens in each chapter in each episode, it almost feels like it's these different stages,
mhm,
and they really go up and then they go down, and there was a lot of room for our own voice to give that uh give that look from our own perspective. So, and we both embraced that to each other. He wasn't like, this is how it looks, this is how we're going to do it,
right.
which I really appreciated. And, we also, at the beginning, we looked at each other's lookbooks and realized that there were certain images that we shared. So we were on the same page, I think, from the beginning. And, I'm so happy to have shared this show with him. I don't know if you always can say that, but I truly believe that.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a great first experience of, collaborating with another cinematographer on a series. Yeah, well, what's it like to be nominated for your work on Lessons in Chemistry?
I am, it's, you think about all these awards that you could get, especially when you're starting out. It's like, you dream of this and that. Um, to me, being nominated by the ASC, it's like these are my peers, and whether I win or not, it's just to be recognized by my community is such an honor. When it happened, I was blown away, and I had all of these texts and emails, and it just felt so wonderful. Um, we do this work not for the awards. I do it to tell the best story I can. I put my all into this show, and um, I'm glad that it was recognized in that way. Um, But yeah, I mean, I'm just, to be recognized by the members of the ASC is a true honor.